The year is 2004, and on April 25th, NASCAR is racing at the iconic Talladega Superspeedway. The strongest competitors in the field were two of the most popular drivers in NASCAR history, Jeff Gordon and Dale Earnhardt Jr. Although, this is Talladega, so the vast majority at the track is Earnhardt country. DEI is by far the strongest cars when it comes to the restrictor plate tracks at this time. In fact, Dale Jr. was able to win the biggest race in his career 2 months prior by winning the Daytona 500. It seems like today he is going to repeat his success, edging out Team RCR, the same team his father raced for. However, as the laps closed, there was one team that was starting to rise to the front.
Whoa, Gordon way to the bottom of the racetrack, and Jimmie Johnson comes right up the bumper of Dale Earnhardt Jr., and Gordon gets the lead.
Jimmie Johnson and Jeff Gordon both had strong cars to race against Dale Earnhardt Jr., and with 7 laps to go, the Pepsi number 24 car was able to make the pass for the lead. This didn't seem like a big issue for the number 8 Budweiser machine, as there was still plenty of time in the race with just how fast his Monte Carlo was. With 5 laps to go, Dale Jr. had enough momentum to go around the outside for the lead. That was until...
Oh, trouble! One car around, and it's Brian Vickers.
All right, the caution is out, and we are past the red flag line. We are past the red flag line.
Brian Vickers, Jeff Gordon's teammate, would spin by himself, bringing out the caution. Now the question remained, who was up front at the time of caution? To the delight of everyone, it looked to be Dale Jr., as he was in front of the 24 car going around the tri-oval and to the start-finish line. Looks like it's going to be a celebration for Junior Nation in Alabama. Only, there was one issue. A new rule has been in place for 2004, stating that the field is frozen at the time of caution, meaning that whoever held the lead once the yellow was thrown will be the leader. And for that split second when the caution was thrown, Jeff Gordon was still in the lead. And excitement from the crowd was quickly turned into a bitter rage as fans saw the number 24 Pepsi car go back in front of their beloved number 8 car. What's worse was that the laps were ticking away, meaning that if NASCAR couldn't restart the race with 2 laps to go, then the race would finish under yellow, and Dale Jr. would have no shot at running for the victory. In the end, NASCAR made the decision to have the race finish under yellow, with Jeff Gordon taking the win. The anger from the crowd was so tremendous that beer cans and debris littered the racetrack. Cars either hugged the fence line or the apron in hopes to avoid the silver bullets from the crowd. It was clear that fans at the track didn't see a driver win by the slimmest of margins, but rather their most disliked driver beating the son of their late beloved driver in the most dubious way possible. How could a race end like this? Why would NASCAR not restart the race in time? Why couldn't it have been like it was back in 1998, where the winners raced to the line? Well, NASCAR had a plan for this that seemed to fix the problem, but led to a rabbit hole that no one was prepared to see. Today, we dive into the weird history of NASCAR by going around in circles with the NASCAR Overtime.
20 years of trying, 20 years of frustration. Dale Earnhardt will come to the caution flag to win the Daytona 500. Finally!
In the 1998 Daytona 500, perhaps the greatest victory in NASCAR happened thanks to a late race caution. Instead of the field being frozen and another attempt to try to finish the race under green, NASCAR would make the drivers race to the start-finish line, and whoever made it there first would be declared the winner should the yellow run to the scheduled distance. This is exactly what happened in 1998, when a caution came and Dale Earnhardt was able to run back to the start-finish line first in order to win his first and only Daytona 500. A finish that didn't upset hardly anyone, as the person everyone wanted to see won the race. However, that was not always the case for a race ending under yellow. 2 years later, the Daytona 500 would see another race end under yellow. This time, however, the Daytona 500 was considered to many as one of the worst races for a crown jewel event. Dale Jarrett wound up winning that Daytona 500, to the dismay of almost everyone. NASCAR at this point knew that a rule change needed to be made in order to avoid these types of anticlimactic finishes. A situation that only got more difficult in the early 2000s when NASCAR had to make the rule change thanks to an almost terrifying incident that happened to the said 2000 Daytona 500 winner. In the 2003 Sylvania 300, Dale Jarrett was involved in an incident in which his car was totaled and parked in the middle of the racetrack. That didn't stop drivers from racing around him while he was in the middle of removing his seatbelts. This effectively changed NASCAR's ruling of running to the line when a caution was thrown, taking the sport to where it was in the 2004 season before the Talladega finish. So now, NASCAR had to find a solution on what to do if a caution was thrown with just a few laps left without endangering anyone in the race nor upsetting the fans. And that was the new overtime rule. The overtime rule was nothing new to the sport. In fact, the Truck Series was enforcing the rule all the way back in 1995 during its inauguration. The rule was simple. If a caution was thrown prior to the white flag being shown on the racetrack, then the trucks would be lined back up again for a 2-lap shootout, better known as a green-white checkered. There was only one attempt, so if a caution was thrown at any time during the green-white checkered run, then the race was over. NASCAR decided to take this concept and apply it to both the Cup Series and the then Busch Series, as neither had a green-white checkered rule. The question was, would this rule be efficient enough to fix the problem that was upsetting fans? Well, the world didn't have to wait too long for their answer, because at the championship finale at Homestead that same year, fans were gifted with one of the closer championship battles in the chase era, which ended in a green-white checkered run. Kurt Busch snagged his first and only NASCAR Cup Series championship over the powerhouse Hendrick cars of Jeff Gordon and Jimmy Johnson, the same duo that snubbed Junior of his Talladega win. The points battle between the three came down to just 16 points, the equivalent to about 4 points in today's point system. Fans were pleased by this change, as it gave fans an exciting finish to a new playoff system introduced to the Cup Series. Perhaps this simple NASCAR overtime was going to please fans for the foreseeable future, but for it to be absolutely perfect, it had to please its toughest critics, and that was the ones who started this trend, the Talladega fan base. In 2007, Talladega saw the green-white checkered rule for the third time since its inception to the Cup Series. An interesting number at the time, as Jeff Gordon was tied with Dale Earnhardt in wins in the Cup Series. Gordon was in the lead for the overtime restart, and it seemed like Junior was not going to be as strong of a competitor as he was in his 2004 outing. No matter, as most fans at Talladega basically had the same mindset, anyone but Jeff Gordon. On the final restart, Jeff Gordon would get immediate pressure from his teammate along with Kurt Busch and Tony Stewart. However, none of them had a chance to ever challenge the 4-time champ, as cars were immediately wrecking in turns 1 and 2. Since there was only one attempt for a green-white checkered, the winner was Jeff Gordon after a mere mile of green flag racing. To the surprise of no one, fans reacted the same way as before, with cans flying down on the racetrack as Gordon had finally passed Dale Earnhardt for the most wins in NASCAR. A stat that was going to eventually happen, but at Talladega seemed heartbreaking for many. Although changes were not made immediately after this unfortunate ending, we would see changes at the turn of the decade with the overtime rules. As races were still being plagued by finishing under yellow, NASCAR still thought changes needed to be made in order to ensure that races could finish without both the checkered and yellow waving. At the beginning of 2010, NASCAR amended Procedure 9-14C of the 2010 rulebook, which changed the limit of green-white checkered attempts from 1 to 3. This change was immediately announced by the then VP of Competition, Robin Pemberton. He stated that, "We want to do all we can to finish our races under green flag conditions. The fans want to see that, and so do the competitors. We felt that putting a cap at 3 attempts to finish the race under green is the way to go. It gives the fans what they want, and it also gives the teams a better opportunity to prepare for their end of race strategy." Upon the first couple years with the new implementation, the rule seemed to do its job well, as the amount of races finishing under yellow was at an all-time low. I mean, sure, there were more incidents near the end of events, but at the very least, the fans were starting to get what they wanted. With that said, there was an issue starting to arise with these changes. With more overtime attempts meant that there were more chances for the leaders to have the victories to slip away. One driver who struggled the most with the rule change was actually the driver that led to the change itself. With the overtime rule in effect, Jeff Gordon had been the leader on a NASCAR Overtime restart 12 different times. In those 12 races, he has only won half of them. The interesting stat about this is that from 2010 onward, Gordon would never win an overtime finish if he was the leader. In 2010, Jeff Gordon led in 2 overtime restarts, one at Martinsville and another at Phoenix. Both times, he simply was outran on the restarts, making it his 3rd and final season where he went winless as a driver. But of course, those defeats didn't pale in comparison to his defeats in 2012 and 2014. In the 2012 race at Martinsville, Jeff Gordon and Jimmy Johnson decided to stay out on the racetrack for the restart after David Rudiman broke down the front straightaway with only 3 laps to go. The restart was complete pandemonium as Ryan Newman bumped the number 15 car Boyer going into turn 1, taking out both Hendrick cars, ending both their chances to win the race, which was especially brutal knowing that this could have been Hendrick's 200th victory as an organization. The loss was incredibly upsetting, but perhaps not his worst, as Texas in 2014 was even more devastating. In 2014, Jeff Gordon was definitely one of the top championship contenders that season with 4 victories, 14 top 5s, and 23 top 10s. Going into the 3rd to last race of the season, Jeff Gordon was looking to lock himself into the championship 4 after being dominant in the Texas race. However, a caution at 4 to go forced yet another NASCAR overtime for Jeff Gordon to overcome. Once again, Jeff Gordon stayed out on the track and hoped for the best on the restart, but similar to what happened 2 years prior, Gordon ran into problems going into turn number 1.
Contact Gordon and Keselowski.
The contact between Jeff Gordon and Brad Keselowski inevitably ended Gordon's chances to run for his 5th championship that 2014 season, leading to a major brawl on pit road and heartbreak for 24 fans once again. Although this was a negative for overtime rules, it wasn't truly a huge issue, as a majority of the time, drivers who were leading on the overtime restart tend to wind up in victory lane. The main issue would be the crashes that came from it. As the previous races have shown, drivers tend to get riskier knowing that this may be their best chance to run for a victory. They can't be blamed either, as having a victory that close in their hands and being in a point system where winning is everything only makes the restarts more dire. Especially when it comes to super speedway races, as Daytona and Talladega provide the best opportunities to pass as many cars as possible on the restarts. Unfortunately, all these combinations would lead to perhaps one of the scariest crashes in the 2015 Coke Zero 400. Thanks to a single car spinout with just 4 laps to go, drivers were bunched up again for an overtime restart in a race where theoretically anyone could win. Because of this, drivers were going to push everything they had in those last 5 miles of the race, and coming through the tri-oval, some cars pushed a little too hard.
Junior will win at Daytona. And the big one happens behind them.
Oh my God.
Austin Dillon experienced one of the most violent crashes in NASCAR history. The car spun on the inside lane, flipped over multiple rows of cars before hitting the cat's fence at well over 160 miles per hour. The car then came to rest on its roof, only to be hit one more time by Brad Keselowski. Luckily, no one was seriously injured, and Austin Dillon walked away with only a bruised tailbone. A moment everyone was thankful no one lost their life, but one that had NASCAR reconsidering their overtime rules. After this crash, many were wondering whether or not NASCAR races should have more than one overtime, especially at restrictor plate races. Drivers and teams alike were starting to oppose multiple overtimes as they felt like it was more of a reason to wreck more cars. Luckily, there was no other restrictor plate races for the rest of the 2015 season, except for one, Talladega Superspeedway. Many were worried that a similar crash would happen again, but this time at the faster and larger racetrack. I mean, at this point, Talladega hasn't seen too many positives with the overtime rules, so making an alteration might be a smart move for officials and for NASCAR. Because of this, NASCAR decided to reduce the overtime restarts back down to 1 just for the Talladega race. That way, no meaningless controversy could evolve from multiple overtimes. Did NASCAR finally solve the problem? Was this the route that we needed to go all along when it came to overtimes? Unfortunately, the answer was a resounding no.
Smoking coming out of the one of Jamie McMurray. And the caution comes out. Flag back in the air. Round goes to 48.
What the hell is even that?
Cross it out.
We're saying not in a 10.
Oh, shit. Here we go again.
Green flag back in the air. The 4 not going. They wreck behind him. Caution comes out. Now the question is, who was in front?
But at least now it can't get much worse.
But it did get worse.
Unofficially, Joey Logano, the winner at Talladega.
Move this man!
And the beverages fly. Joey Logano flew to victory lane this afternoon, and he sweeps round 2 of the 2015 chase.
After potentially the worst ending to a race that has ever been seen by the turn of the millennium, the 2015 CampyWorld.com 500 went down as one of the worst races in the modern NASCAR era. With terrible officiating, cars refusing to stay in line for the restart, and Dale Jr. being again snubbed of another Talladega victory over NASCAR's most disliked driver at the time, it seemed like the world of the NASCAR Overtime was at its worst. They tried the single overtime rule, and it failed at Talladega. They tried the multiple overtimes, and it ended almost in devastation at Daytona. And now they tried to make a specific overtime for the super speedways, and again, it ended in the same outcome as it did 11 years prior, with pissed off fans and litter covering the racetrack. Now, NASCAR had put themselves in a tough predicament as fans were now expecting finishes of races to end under green. However, what they planned to fix that issue with was being more of a problem than a solution. NASCAR had to think of something for the 2016 season and fast, and what they came to was a decision that no one saw coming nor wanted. In the 2016 season, the overtime line was introduced to the NASCAR racing world, a new way to determine whether or not a race should have another restart or end under the yellow. Depending on the racetrack, a white line would be placed around the racetrack to determine where the overtime line was located. If on an overtime restart, the leader passes the line before a caution comes out, then the race is deemed official, whether or not a caution is thrown. However, if the leader does not pass the line before a caution is thrown at an overtime restart, then the field would be bunched up again for another restart for an unlimited number of times, until we have the leader pass that said line under green flag conditions. Most tracks typically had the overtime line on the backstretch, while at shorter racetracks, the line was typically in turns 3 or 4, or just at the start-finish line. It was a way to eliminate debacles like what happened at Talladega the year prior, but the question was it going to help in the dilemma regarding races ending under caution? With an 18th-month span, the overtime line was tainted in controversy as multiple races seemingly ended prematurely due to a caution flag being thrown a few seconds too late. It happened in a couple races for the Xfinity Series and the Cup Series as well. What was typically happening was that drivers were wrecking down the back straightaway, virtually putting it in the hands of the racing officials to throw a caution right then and there. This proved to be an issue as NASCAR was failing to throw the caution in time when clearly the race needed to be stopped for an accident. The worst outcome of this unfortunately came at a crown jewel race at the 2018 Brickyard 400 when the field started to wreck out of the exit at turn 2. Unfortunately, NASCAR waited 1 second too long before throwing the yellow flag. Casey Kane would be the victor of the race, being his first and only win at the racetrack. But sadly, fans were frustrated with the outcome of the race as it seemed like NASCAR gave the 5 team the victory. Less than 2 weeks later, NASCAR decided to scrap the overtime line and effect it back to the original overtime rules. The only difference was at this point, the limit over overtimes was changed from 3 to unlimited, meaning that a race could go on for hours before a winner was determined. Of course, that would be almost impossible, but there have been some races where drivers have tried to do that very same thing. As of right now, This is the most current overtime rule format that is in place for NASCAR's top 3 divisions, and to be honest, I think this is the best we are going to get. Some fans may be in favor of limiting overtimes to 3 or even 1, but if that were to happen, then we could see similar outcomes to what happened at Talladega. Some fans even like the idea of having no overtimes, as one of the most memorable races in history ended under yellow. Although the outcome of that race is virtually untouched, it's theoretically a diamond in the rough. There have been experiences of having the race being restarted even after the white flag has been displayed, as we see that today in the NASCAR ARCA series. But based on what we've seen in the highly controversial All-Star race of 2022, I doubt NASCAR fans want to see that instituted in the top series. If you ask me, my personal opinion is that the way NASCAR has it set up is the best. I mean, sure, a race might be taken away from a driver who was leading prior to the overtime rule, but that has happened roughly only 25% of the time, which really is not that much. Do I get annoyed at 5 overtimes in a race like we saw in the race at Nashville? Yes, but honestly, it's still better than seeing a race end under caution. As for when NASCAR officials decide to throw a caution, that's an entirely different rabbit hole to begin with. So in conclusion, is it perfect? No, and it never will be. Is it a better solution than what has been presented in the past? I believe so. But until then, this topic will always be one with fans going around in circles to determine how it could possibly be better.